What is it like to grow up as a child of Holocaust survivors? How does a Jewish man come to faith in Jesus as Messiah? And how has that journey shaped a lifetime of ministry? In this episode, we sit down with Dr. Michael Rydelnik to hear his powerful story from his family's survival through the Holocaust to his own salvation and decades of ministry. Stay right there. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome to the Bible and Theology Matters podcast,
where we discuss all things Bible and theology.
Because it matters. What you really believe determines how you really behave.
Now, here is your host, Associate Professor of Bible Exposition at Dallas Theological Seminary
and Professor of Bible and Theology for the National Theological College and Graduate School,
Dr. Paul Weaver.
Welcome back to the Bible and Theology Matters podcast, where we discuss all things Bible and theology because it matters. What you really believe determines how you really behave. I'm grateful to have Dallas Theological Seminary as a sponsor of this podcast. Here at DTS, we offer flexible degree programs online, on campus, and at our teaching sites around the world. With 19 unique degree programs, including doctoral degrees, master's degrees, and certificate programs, there's truly something for everyone. To learn more about studying at Dallas Theological Seminary, please visit dts.edu. I'm pleased to have Dr. Michael Rydelnik on today's program. Dr. Rydelnik grew up in an observant Jewish home. His parents were Holocaust survivors. He came to believe in Jesus as the Messiah, which drastically changed the course of his life. Dr. Rydelnik is Emeritus Professor of Jewish Studies and Bible at Moody Bible Institute and former academic dean. He's also Adjunct Professor of Bible Exposition here at Dallas Theological Seminary, which is the department in which I have the privilege of serving. Dr. Rydelnik is also the host of the nationally syndicated radio program Open Line with Dr. Michael Rydelnik. He is also a respected author and conference speaker. He is the author of or editor of many books, including the Moody Handbook of Messianic Prophecy, the Moody Bible Commentary, and most recently, How Should Christians Think About Israel? A quick guide to God's covenants, biblical prophecy, and the Jewish people. Dr. Rydelnik, welcome to the Bible and Theology Matters podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be with you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation about your life and ministry, but we would not be having this conversation today at all, right, if it were not for the fact that your parents, unlike 6 million or so Jewish individuals, did not survive the Holocaust. Would you share a little bit of your parents' survival story?
Sure. Both my parents survived. Obviously, that's why I was born. But they were not married to each other. My dad was married, had a business in Poland. He came from a little shtetl, a town that was 90% Jewish. Chmielnik was the name, about 90 kilometers northeast of Krakow. He was married, had 4 sons and a daughter. The daughter was adopted from one of his siblings. My dad's wife and his children did not survive. They were taken to Auschwitz and perished there. So I would say my 4 half-brothers, my half-sister perished, not just his children. They were my siblings. He survived the war mainly because he was used. If you had a skill the Nazis could use, they would often try to extend your ability. The idea was to work people to death. Apart from the death camps, work people to death. Disease would kill people, overcrowding, many things other than just direct killing. But if you had some skill they could use, they would starve you and do all the other things, but try and keep you alive long enough to use that skill. My dad was a furniture maker and a cabinet maker, and so they kept him alive to build barracks in concentration camps and do work like that. And they, of course, tortured him and did things that they pulled his teeth to get his gold teeth, did it without any kind of sedation. Terrible things were done, but he did survive. My mom was significantly younger. Interesting story that happened to her is that she was an orphan, basically. When Hitler came to power, her dad fled to Poland. Her mom had an illness and went to the hospital. Her brother went to the grandparents, and she was kind of left alone and sent to an orphanage run by Lutheran deaconesses. And they were very kind and respectful and would send her to the rabbi for Jewish upbringing. when they did Bible classes. These Lutheran deaconesses are sort of like Protestant nuns, but they were really kind to her and loving. And when she was 16, it was 1938, she became a follower of Yeshua because of the testimony of these Lutheran deaconesses. And then Kristallnacht happened. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, the night when there was a nationwide pogrom against Jews in Germany. They wanted to get her out of Germany. And so she was from Upper Silesia. She was today it's part of Poland, but it was a German area, a town called Buiten, and now it's called Bytom in Polish. So they sent her to Poland to a sister deaconess house. And then, of course, September 1st, 1939, the Nazis invade. She had to go to the ghetto. She was in the Lodz ghetto. She was in several labor camps and finally spent the bulk of her time at the Gross Rosen concentration camp complex, which my dad was in as well. It was a large complex of concentration camps, slave labor. And she survived, I believe, because she was trained as an RN with the deaconesses. And she also had great facility with languages. She spoke German and Yiddish, Polish, and French. And so because they were Jews from all over Europe, the Nazis used her language skills for clerical work and allowed her to set up an infirmary in the camps, which it wasn't really anything very helpful. It was a cot with some straw in it, infected by typhus, typhoid disease. And that's where she actually hid her Bible. That's the only thing she went into the camps with that she came out with, which was her Bible that she hid among the typhoid-infected straw. The SS wouldn't look there. So she survived. She was quite ill by the time the war ended. A few days before her liberation of her camp, she was an entirely women's camp. There were several camps in Gross Rosen complex, and she was in a women's camp. And they took the women from that camp as the Russians were approaching, the Red Army was approaching, and they marched them towards Germany. And my mom was not able to walk, so they left her behind with a few other people that couldn't walk. She was down to 70 pounds or less. And she was then liberated by the Russian army, the Red Army. Significantly, every woman that was made to march died on that death march.
Wow.
But so her inability to walk actually saved my mom. But when she had the infirmary, they gave her the straw. They gave her 50 aspirin a month. And that was the extent of her care, what she was allowed to care for people. So that's how my mom survived. And then after the war, she got as fast as she could, as did my dad, to West Berlin. She wanted to be out of though she appreciated the Red Army for liberating her, she didn't want to be under communist Soviet Union. So she made her way to West Berlin as best she could, out of the displaced persons camps and into the West Berlin. She got a job after she recovered as an RN at a hospital working in a geriatric unit. And my dad remarried after the war, and his wife died in childbirth. And he had a premature baby in an incubator, my brother, and he didn't know what to do. And he saw this woman 18 years younger than him who also survived. And she was in the hospital there where he was. And he said, I need you to marry me to care for this baby. And it was a very arranged marriage. And that's how they married. And my dad, after they married, she had told him that she believed in Yeshua, but he told her that if she ever told anyone, that he would divorce her. And so my mom became a silent, secret follower of Yeshua. They came to the United States 1950. By this point, my mom had adopted this baby that my dad had. So they had their son and my sister. And then here in America, my other sister was born and I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And I always joke about being from the Holy Land because that's what Brooklyn felt like. But anyway, that's how my parents got to America. My mom was a quiet believer. When my dad got to America, he had been raised very Orthodox, very observant, kind of lost his faith because of what happened with the Nazis. And then when he got to America, he didn't want to give Hitler a posthumous victory. So he reverted to being an observant Jew. So I was raised kosher home, Shabbat observant, very traditional observant Jewish home. and never knew that my mom believed that
Really?
Yeshua was the Messiah. So that's how we got to America.
Huh. So she didn't even tell you children that she.
Oh, no, I never knew.
Huh.
I never knew till I was in high school. The only hints, I look back at my upbringing. I remember when I was 10, I went to Israel for the summer to stay with my dad had one relative that survived, his sister. He was one of 6 siblings. 4 perished. One sister survived, moved to Israel. And when I was 10, I went to spend the summer with her, well, it was after the 6-Day War. And I wanted to see Israel. And so I spent the summer there, 1968. I had gone on a tour, and someone had mentioned on a tour when we went to the wilderness of Judea that this is where Jesus debated the devil. It was a Jewish tour. It didn't treat it as a fact. It just kind of mentioned it. It didn't even get the story right. He didn't debate the devil, but that's what was said. And I was kind of intrigued by that. I had just read The Devil and Daniel Webster in school, and I thought, I'd like to read about that. And I asked my mom if it would be okay if I ever read the New Testament. And she said, oh, sure, you can read anything you want. That's fine. But I didn't read it. But that's the only hint I could think of. And my mom did allow me to watch the Peanuts Christmas special, which is where I heard the New Testament for the first time.
Interesting.
When Linus drops his blanket and tells the birth narrative.
Very interesting. Thinking back to your father's first wife and children, how did they die of starvation? Did they die of?
Well, they were taken to Auschwitz, and they were exterminated there. Very often, children, 1.5 million children of Jewish children died almost immediately because they weren't able to work. Very famously, I think in the book Night by Elie Wiesel, he was told to say that he was older than he was so that he could survive. She didn't have a skill to work, and so they sent her directly to the gas chambers.
Did your dad talk about that much?
Yeah, many survivors never talked about the Holocaust. I felt like my parents only talked about the Holocaust. It was the most normal thing in my house. Growing up, we talked about it all the time. I learned never to complain. I remember complaining about the dinner my mom made once I came home. I was, 9 years old. My mom had made a dairy dinner, cottage cheese and cheeses and things like that and bread. And I said, cottage cheese for supper? Because we were kind of a meat and potatoes family. And my dad really scolded me and sat me down and told me what food was like in concentration camp and in the ghetto, and how I should be grateful for any food I put in my mouth. And I thought, I will never complain about food again. And often, if there was any complaining in our family, we heard about concentration camp. And so that was, I don't think that's the preferred method for child rearing, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it's very common, I think, among second generation. I've talked about this with other survivors' children, about never feeling that you can have any kind of genuine pain or complaint or problem because compared to what your parents went through, it's insufficient. So nothing compared to them. And I've thought about that a lot because my parents talked about this quite a bit. I just think it's something that you think, oh, whatever it is, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing. It's kind of kept me positive.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, in our next episode, we're going to talk about the sad situation of the rise of antisemitism and to me, just the history of the Jewish people and how Satan's tried to annihilate the people of God, the chosen people, for so many different times is in itself evidence that God has a plan and purpose for the future ethnic Jewish people. So, but that's a tease for our next episode, but just are sad, horrific stories to hear. But we need to share them, don't we?
Yeah. I think that there's what we're seeing today is there are people who it's a growing, obviously for years, there's been the Holocaust denial among ideologues who hate Jewish people. But what is scary to me is that today, young people surveys are showing more and more, particularly among the evangelical right, are saying that the Jewish people exaggerated it. It wasn't really 6 million Jews, that maybe a couple 100,000. There are all these falsehoods that are going out. And sadly, to me, young men from evangelical homes are buying in. And that's difficult for me to bear. I did notice something. I taught a course on the Holocaust at Moody Bible Institute for many years, every fall semester. And it was on the Holocaust and the problem of evil. And very often, the classes would be 2 or 3 to 1 female. Now, it was a Jewish studies course, so every Jewish studies major took it, but it was also a theology elective. So every student at Moody could take it because they all are required to have a theology elective. But most of the time, the students that took it, and it would fill. It was a very popular course, but it was usually 2 or 3 times more women than men that would take the course, young women. So I think that shows that men were just not as concerned. Maybe they had other theological issues that they wanted to study, but I do find that it's always been the case that evangelical men, young men, aren't as interested or concerned about this.
Yeah. That's sad.
Mhm.
So, as far as being raised in an observant Jewish home, tell us more about that. What was it like?
Well, it was actually, I didn't have any complaints. I loved my upbringing in terms of Jewish identity. I celebrated it. Sometimes it gets a little annoying. You want to ride your bike on Shabbat, but you can't. You know.
I couldn't play basketball on Sunday either. The church I grew up in.
Okay, so same. You understand, right? But that didn't make you unhappy. It's just priorities. My dad was very determined that I not, like in our synagogue, they had a synagogue service for the young people called Junior Congregation, which was a little bit more accessible, but I wasn't allowed to go to it. I had to sit with my dad. We had to follow the Siddur. I had to say everything I was supposed to say, read out loud. He had his thumb right under the Hebrew with me. He made sure that I didn't get any shortcuts in terms of prayer or anything like that. I think that part of our family, and among ultra Orthodox, this may not always be the case, but in our family, we had a very deep commitment to Israel. I remember the 6-Day War. My dad wouldn't leave the TV. He watched every minute he could. When he came home from work, he was watching the UN discussions that led up to the war, because the Egyptians and the Syrians had brought their military right up to the borders, and they were threatening to drive Israel into the sea and all this. And my dad was just overwhelmed with fear for the state of Israel. And in our house, I was just mentioning to my wife that I grew up, and I wish I knew what happened to it. We had a bronze letter opener and pen holder that my dad had brought from Israel when I was a baby. I don't know when. He was visiting his sister, and it had the heads, like a bronze cast of David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, and Theodore Herzl, who was the father of modern Zionism. And that was on the desk, prominently displayed. That was something, I don't know whatever became of it, but the state of Israel. And as I said, when I was a kid, the 6-Day War happened, and then I desperately wanted to go see the Kotel, the Western Wall, and pray there.
Yeah. Were your parents ever tempted to go back to Israel or think about it?
Yeah, they would talk often about whether or not to move to Israel. They did that quite a bit. The problem was for my dad was after the war, he said he couldn't fight anymore and decided not to move to Israel because he would have gone right into the military and fought in the War of Independence if he had gone to Israel after the war. Although when my mom went public as a believer and my dad did indeed divorce her, we're talking about 1972, he lived in the States for another year or so, and then about 1973, he moved to Israel.
Interesting.
In his retirement, yeah.
So how old were you when your parents divorced?
I was about 15.
Okay.
I was a freshman in high school.
So Did your mother have an influence on your examination of
Only
Yeshua?
in terms of making me really angry. Yeah, she came home one day and announced that she believed in Yeshua, that she was going to this Bible study. It was Beth Shalom. It was a Messianic congregation planted by Chosen People Ministries in Brooklyn. They had a woman there who was served. She was one of the great outreach workers among Jewish people in history. Her name was Hilda Kozer. She was my mom's Bible teacher. And she was the one, my mom had, I think my parents were having some issues in their marriage, and my mom was feeling quite badly about her lack of open faith. And so she wrote to the deaconesses. She said, "Are there any Jewish believers here in America?" And they said, "There's one." They knew of one. His name was Daniel Fuchs, the president of Chosen People Ministries. Well, obviously there were more than one. And she wrote to Dan Fuchs, and he called her and directed her to Beth Shalom there in Brooklyn, and to go to the women's Bible study led by Hilda Kozer. And Miss Kozer is the one that encouraged my mom to go public. And she did. My dad immediately demanded she recant her faith. Not just keep it quiet, but recant. She wouldn't do it. And so he divorced her. I felt like my mom had broken up our family, had really hurt our family. I was furious with her, actually. I thought that she was betraying her people and hurt her family by doing this. And we got to the point, she had custody of the kids as the separation started. I just couldn't even talk to her. It was really quite bad. I was so angry with her about it. And then she started having all these other middle-aged Jewish women from the congregation she became friends with. They would come to our house and they would grab their Bibles and want to talk to me. I'm going out to play basketball, and they want to talk to me about Jesus. I thought, these women are so obnoxious. So yeah, it had a negative effect in that sense. But what my sister and I were in the car, her car. I had a sister that drove already, and she was picking my mom up one day. She said, we have to swing by. And she went by this center in Coney Island where Beth Shalom was, to pick up my mom from a Bible study. And I was just livid.
Yeah.
We were going there, and Hilda Kozer came out to meet me, and I came upon this brilliant idea that I was going to argue with her, and my mom would then see how stupid this thing is, and she would leave the faith. And so I got a book about how to answer the questions or the issues raised by Christians, and I began to see Hilda Kozer periodically and argue with her. And that's really, I'd say that my negative attitude toward my mom spurred that. And it was Hilda Kozer who I thought presented better arguments than the book I had. And it was all about Messianic prophecy that we talked.
Neat. So during this time, did your mother have you all going with her to, or did you continue going to a Jewish synagogue? How did that work?
Yeah,
with your
I was a
siblings?
member of the synagogue. Yeah. I wasn't a member anymore because my dad wasn't there, but I still continued to go to the synagogue where I had my bar mitzvah. Although I have to say, after my dad left, I was less observant, but still there, still affiliated with that synagogue.
Did your dad leave all of the children, even including the first from the second marriage, his second?
Yeah, well, he was already, he was 10 years older than me. He was independent at this point, and I had a teen sister who had moved to Israel when she was about, 14 or 15. She was living on a kibbutz in Israel. And then I had another sister that lived at home. She had lived in Israel for a year with my aunt, but she was going to nursing school and lived at home, and she was college age. And that's sort of the family there. My older sister was not as angry with my mom, I would say, as I was. So
how did you eventually come to faith? Through these dialogues?
Well, I would argue with Hilda. Never called her Hilda, Miss Kozer. I always felt pretty confident when we'd sit there. We had the Bible open. Interestingly, we would use the Hebrew Bible. And then we also had an English translation from the Jewish Publication Society. So on hard passages, we had English, but we would argue with the Hebrew Bible about Messianic prophecy. And she took me through various passages. I always thought I was right. And then when I would go home, I would think her answers seemed better than mine. And that bothered me. One day she asked me, have you ever asked God to show you if Jesus is the Messiah? And I said, no, I don't need to. He's not, so I don't have to. And she said, so what are you afraid of? Why don't you just ask him to show you? And I said, it's pointless. And she said, well, what does it hurt? And so she challenged me. I thought, okay, I'll pray. I think I offered the single worst prayer in the history of prayer. It was something like, I know Jesus isn't the Messiah, but if he is, and I know he's not, you can show me, and I know you won't because he isn't. Amen. It was just horrible prayer. The other thing that she really challenged me with one day was, what do I do about my sin? And I kept saying, well, you fast on Yom Kippur, you do good deeds. But the main thing I said to her is I really don't sin very much because I was a nice Jewish boy.
Mm-hmm.
My life was school. It was playing ball, basketball in the winter, baseball in the summer. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't doing a lot of stuff that other teenagers were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I was a nice Jewish boy. I was the kid that everyone wanted their daughter to go out with. Because I wasn't going to do anything bad,
Mm-hmm.
I was a nice boy. So I told her I didn't sin. And so then she began to go through the 10 Commandments with me. Well, did you ever do this? Did you ever tell a lie? Did you, and of course everyone tells a lie. And I said, well, and so because of that challenge, then she asked me, what did I do about my sin? We looked at Leviticus, about the need for a sacrifice. And we no longer have a sacrifice, I told her, because there's no longer a temple.
Mm-hmm.
We then had a long discussion about the fourth servant song, Isaiah 52:13 through 53:12. That was I think that was the most extensive discussion that we had. And I tried to make the case that the suffering servant was Israel at the hands of the Gentiles. But she, I think, made a really great case for it being an individual, a messianic figure. Even showed me that in rabbinic literature, it said that. That really kind of struck me. Anyway, that was all leading up, was months of this kind of interaction.
In just a moment, we'll return to our previously recorded program, but now, our missions moment of the week.
My name is Qaldas Zaki. I am from Upper Egypt, area called Asyut, but I am grew up in Cairo. I am realtor, Sudanese refugees ministry in Egypt and Sudan. I'm working among the Sudanese since 1993. For a security issue, I need to leave Sudan with my family immediately. I came to Egypt and studied in NTC. I started in 2017 in bachelor program. I started master in biblical studies in 2018 and we graduated in 2023. It helped me a lot to arrange my thought, my knowledge of the Bible and put every file in their places, and it opened a lot of doors before me to share with the people which I learned. Many churches in Sudan, Egypt, and also in Chad, most of the churches, when they knows I have a master degree from NTC, they welcome me, asked me to preach. Because I appreciate for NTC for what I learned, I encourage now other 4 Sudanese to join NTC in master degree and other 6 in bachelor degree, because really I love NTC, and for this reason I encourage the other to join NTC too.
The National Theological College and Graduate School has 3 campuses in the Middle East and 1 in East Africa. If you'd like to learn how you can partner with NTCGS in training nationals to do the work of the ministry in Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and East Africa, please visit ntcgs.org. That's ntcgs.org. Now back to our previously recorded program.
My mom had been nagging me to come to services with her. And I just said no. In our house, though, if there was ever new food, you had to taste it. And if you didn't like it, then you didn't have to eat it. So if you hated Brussels sprouts, you took one bite, without a fight, and then you
Mhm.
and then you could say you hate it, right?
Mhm.
So I thought, I'm going to apply this. I'm going to go one time with my mom to the service, say I hated it, and I'll never go again.
Mhm.
So that's how I kind of decided I was going to just get her to leave me alone. And it was especially because it was a film about Israel.
Mhm.
I figure if it's about Israel, what could it possibly have to do with Jesus? And so I went to see the film, and it was a film called His Land. It was produced by Billy Graham, someone I really didn't know. It was being shown by the Billy Graham Association at the Beth Sar Shalom. Beth Sar Shalom, by the way, means House of the Prince of Peace. So I went, and the first half was Cliff Richard, the rock and roll singer, and Cliff Barrows talking about how the prophets foretold the regathering of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. And they're walking around showing how God promised this land to the Jewish people. I was thinking, oh, yeah, I like this. I agree with this.
Mm.
This is good. I'm glad I came on this week.
Uh-huh.
And then I can say I hate it and never come again. And then the second half was the same prophets foretold. They talked about this. Same prophets foretold the coming of the Messiah, and they went over these messianic prophecies. And I was really annoyed. I folded my arms. I was sitting in the back row thinking, I just can't wait to get out of here. I'm so angry. And then the man who had come from the Billy Graham Association to show this movie got up, and he gave an invitation, something I'd never heard before. He asked everyone to bow their heads and their hearts, which I didn't know quite what that meant. Did you bend over? And he said, no one will know if you decide to believe this, just you and me and God. And I thought, I would never do this. I would never do this. And as he was talking, I thought, it kind of struck me that I was being quite a hypocrite, because the part that I liked, I believed, but the same prophets, the part I didn't like, I wouldn't believe. And I thought, well, if Jesus fulfilled these prophecies, then if I were going to be a good Jew, I would believe in the Jewish Messiah, even if I was the only one. That would make me a good Jew. And I was just kind of surprised. All of a sudden, after thinking I would never raise my hand, I looked up and there was my hand going up. And I thought, I'm going to put this down. I don't want anyone ever to know. I'll never talk about this. I'm not going to be a fanatic. And I put up my hand, and before I could get it down, he said, I see that hand. And it was really quiet in there. And my mom's friend, Claire, in the front row peeked to see who it was. And she said, it's Michael. And so in front of 200 people, I was completely busted because I didn't plan on telling anyone. And then first person that came to me was this guy from Billy Graham. He wanted to pray with me. And I said, I've been praying about this. Remember that bad prayer? And so I don't need you to pray with me. So I didn't pray. And which I think is interesting, because that moment I believed, I just didn't pray. The Bible says that we need to believe. And so I believed. And my mom was all excited. I said, back off, Mom. I'm not going to be a fanatic like you. And then Miss Kozer came, and she wanted to give me a Bible. And I said, what kind of Bible? She said, in English with the New Testament. And I'm like, I have a Bible. It's Hebrew. It's got a silver cover on it. And she said, no, with the New Testament. So she gave me a King James version, which I couldn't understand anyway. The Hebrew was easier than the King James English. My sister at that time, she came that day, and she had several times said that she thought she wanted to believe like Mom, and I talked her out of it. And she got really mad at me. She said, you rat, you talked me out of it. Now you do this. I said, well, I'm not going to be a fanatic. And like these people are. And that was sort of my day that I trusted the Lord. And I don't think I would have been a fanatic. I didn't plan on telling anyone or talking about this or changing my life or doing anything different, allowing God to change my life, I would say. But I got a phone call from a teenager that was at the service that week, and he invited me to Bible study for teens. And I thought, I don't want to go. I told him so. And he kept pressing me. And I finally said, well, there was a really cute strawberry blonde girl I saw at the service. Is she going to be at this Bible study? And he said, yes. I said, okay, I'll come. So I got the address and I went to the Bible study. And turns out I get there, I find out that's his girlfriend, and he never told me. And I thought, oh, this is just a big waste. And we studied a verse from the Bible, study to show yourself approved unto God as a workman. It's be diligent, but the version we said study as a workman that need not be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth. And as we talked about it, I kind of thought about this verse was saying, God wants me to handle the Bible the way my dad, who was an unashamed workman, he did wonderful cabinetry and wonderful chairs and tables and things like that. I thought God wants me to handle the Bible the way my dad handled a piece of oak, and to study it and to learn it and to become a craftsman with it and be unashamed of that. It just kind of gripped me like, okay, I'll study this book and I'll teach it, and I'll teach it to Jewish people. That's actually how I think became a fanatic that I said I wouldn't become, because I then began to talk about the Bible and read the Bible and tell people about the Bible. It was just a few weeks later that I actually began to teach the Bible. I would hate to hear any recordings. Thank God there were none, but I did teach it. So.
And how old were you at this time?
15.
When you came to faith?
Yeah. I was a freshman in high school.
Uh-huh. And did any of your siblings come to faith in Christ as well?
My sister did that very day. She went out to lunch with Hilda Kozer. My other sister started having some medical problems that summer in Israel. She came home for two reasons. One, to get me out of this cult that I had fallen into. And the second reason...
She thought was a cult.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was, but that's what she said. You've fallen into a cult. And the second reason was that she was having problems with her eyes, and they didn't know what it was in Israel. And so she came, and they didn't quite know right away in America either. But after she came in July, by October, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And amazingly, I tried my best that summer. I was almost beating her over the head. I did not have a very sensitive or kind approach. I was badgering her about the faith, and she got really angry with me, but she was listening. And then the day after her diagnosis, she said, I heard you're going to a Bible study on Friday night. And it was another Beth Sar Shalom, but this one was the one in Queens, not in Brooklyn. I was going there too. And because they had a really good youth group there. So she said, well, I think I'll come with you. And at the end of the Bible study, she prayed to receive the Lord.
Nice.
And then my brother, who was the most hostile for all the years and years and years, didn't have any interest. He just was closed. And then he was tragically hit by a car. He was out on a business trip and was crossing the street back to his hotel from a little shop where he was picking up some drinks and some food, like a Quickie Mart, and he was crossing back to the hotel and got hit by a car. Killed. And I went to the funeral, and he had really not wanted to have anything much to do with me. Thought I was a big waste. Used to say, Michael has a really good mind. He's a good speaker. Think how much money he could have made had he become a lawyer. He's wasting his life teaching the Bible. And so I went to the funeral, and it was actually a Presbyterian pastor. I fully expected a rabbi. He was doing a Messianic Jewish funeral service, where he took the Jewish funeral service and adapted it to the faith. And also, when we were carrying the casket, there were people there saying, oh, this is your brother, this is his brother. Your brother gave us your books and things like that. I was so shocked. I was shocked because my brother hated what I had written. And here they're saying he gave out my book to them. Well, during the service, what came to be said was that he had been in the hospital, and this pastor had come to see him and would see him regularly. And so after he was out of the hospital, he went to the service, and right in the middle, one day the guy asked everyone to break up into groups of 2s and 3s and pray. That's what the pastor did. And he did with this woman who was like, oh, how am I going to pray with this obviously lost person? And my brother prayed to receive the Lord right there with this woman. He looked up. She told this story at his funeral. This was just a few months before. She said he looked up and her mouth was wide open, and he kind of touched her on the chin and said, you can close your mouth. Yeah, you heard right. And he was waiting for the following month after he was planning. We were all going to be together for my niece's bat mitzvah in July. And so this happened in June. And he was going to tell us that he had become a follower of Yeshua too, but he was hit by the car first. So we'll have a lot of time to talk in future, but not now, because I didn't know till his funeral that he had made that decision. So.
Wow, that's a powerful story. Very interesting. So obviously, your father did not know of that decision, but was he upset that you children were choosing to?
Oh yeah, that's why he moved to Israel.
Oh,
He moved to Israel in 1973,
okay.
somewhere around there.
So he moved to Israel after a few of you came to faith in Christ.
Yeah. When we believed, and my dad wouldn't talk with us again, and I tried multiple times till he passed away in 1998 to go see him. I made 3 or 4 visits to Israel to see him through the years, and each time he said, "Don't come back."
So when your brother died, you were already a professor at Moody at this time, and you were writing books already?
Yeah. He thought my book, which most people thought was quite pro-Israel, Understanding the Arab-Israeli Conflict. I defend Israel in that book, but also have a concern for all people. I think obviously God so loved the world. I care about all people coming to know Yeshua. And my brother thought, that's what was so shocking to me, was that he thought I was just too liberal. Not pro-Israel enough.
Interesting.
In that book.
In American Judaism, right, there are 3 branches, right? There's the Orthodox, there's the Reformed, and then called conservative.
Yeah.
Which type of synagogue would your family attend?
We were in a modern Orthodox, not ultra-Orthodox. There's even segments within the 3 branches, and we were the modern Orthodox is the branch that we were in.
Yeah. So did you lose any friends at 15? Did you keep going to the Jewish training school? Were you were in a Jewish school at that time?
Yeah. Well, I was in public high school. I still kept going to the schoolyard where we played ball, basketball and softball, things like that, stickball. I'm a New Yorker, Word kind of got out among the guys I had gone to Hebrew school with and the cheder there across the street from the school. There was some mockery, things like that, but not terrible. There was one guy who now Jews for Jesus did not even exist as an organization yet at that point, but it was a slogan for many young Jewish people who believed in Jesus. We called ourselves Jews for Jesus. Okay. But I really didn't. I called myself a Messianic Jew. There were a lot of guys from the synagogue kind of thought I'd lost my mind, but a lot of people think that most Jewish people are just like my dad was, where he was very closed and that's not the case. My rabbi gave me a hard time. I've made friends with my rabbi's grandson, who, there's this rabbi in Brooklyn. I'm living in Chicago, and I met a young man with kids, petting my dogs, and we're talking. Turns out he's my rabbi's grandson. And he says to me, he's a rabbi too. He says, I love Messianic Jews. And I said, you do? Why is that? And he said, because when I would go to pro-Israel rallies, the only group of Jews that were there consistently were the Messianic Jewish community of Chicago. And so I realized that you guys don't hate yourselves. You're not self-hating Jews, but you really believe this. And we've become great friends.
By self-hating Jews, he meant Jewish people that don't want to disclose that or don't.
Or they just hate being Jewish, and so they believe in Jesus. We don't hate being Jewish. It's not like we're trying to get away from being Jewish. Otherwise, we wouldn't call ourselves Messianic Jews. We'd just call ourselves Christians and be done.
Yeah.
But the image in many, in times past, people would say, oh, people just become followers of Jesus because they want to stop being Jewish. But that's not the case. So he learned that. We're still friends, and I lived in a very, very ultra-Orthodox community in Chicago. And everyone knew what I believed. Everyone, because it went through the neighborhood. One heard, the next heard.
And you did that on purpose? You moved to the Orthodox Jewish area?
Yeah. And then I'd walk my dogs. And of course, when you walk your dogs, you meet people, meet your neighbors. And I think that's a great way of meeting your neighbors. And I stayed friends with everyone in the neighborhood. You know, they knew when I met my rabbi's grandson, he said, "What do you do for a living?" The first day we met. And I said, "I'm a professor." He said, "What do you teach?" I said, "Jewish studies and Bible." He said, "Where?" I said, "Moody Bible Institute." He said, "Oh, you're the one that lives over there on the corner house." I said, "Oh, you heard about me?" He said, "Oh, yeah."
Been marked.
Yeah. So, but it was always very, very receptive, very loving, very friendly. It's not what people think.
Yeah. One more question before we get to your ministry and educational academia work. Did you experience any anti-Semitism growing up in Brooklyn, New York?
Sure. Our neighborhood was about half Catholic, half Jewish, where I lived, and sometimes the Catholic kids would call you Christ killer. Sometimes they threw rocks at you. Sometimes they threw snowballs with rocks inside of them. If it was snowy, things like that. It was just sort of a fact of life. What was kind of funny was if one of their parents ever heard them saying such a thing, the parents would come flying out of the house. The good Irish Catholic parents, the Italian Catholic parents, grab those kids by the ear, drag them in, yelling at them. "These are our neighbors. This is not how you talk," you know? Yeah, there was some stuff like that, but I didn't ever feel that it was approved of by those
Not
kids.
by the adults, it was by the kids.
No. Yeah.
Which is different today, right?
Yeah.
Well, tell us about your journey to Moody Bible Institute as a student first and what led you into the ministry. And
Well, when my dad left, the Lord brought someone that served with Chosen People Ministries in the Maryland area, Baltimore. He was a Moody grad, not Jewish, served with them, was a Jewish studies grad from Moody. He and his wife had no kids, weren't able to. And so he not only took me under his wing to teach me the Bible and disciple me, but also to be like a surrogate dad for me. And I'm blessed of God to have known Dan Rigney. He's with the Lord now. And he just started in when I finished up high school because I wanted to study the Bible. And he was just insistent because I was just finishing high school as fast as I could. I went to a high school in Brooklyn that was very liberal, John Dewey High School, named for John Dewey, but you could learn at your own pace. And so I just accelerated high school to get out as fast as I could. The result was that he kept saying, "You should go to Moody. You need to go to Moody." So I'd won a scholarship. The New York State had the Regents Scholarship. I could have gone to any New York State University, and gotten a full tuition scholarship. And he would say, "Well, Moody, there's no tuition. You know, it's paid by friends of the Institute. Go to Moody, go to Moody." And he just badgered me into going to Moody, truthfully. And I had a great experience there. Studied with Dr. Louis Goldberg in Jewish studies. Finished Moody was only a 3-year school at the time. I finished my degree at Azusa Pacific. Met my wife in the Jewish studies, or actually met her the summer before I started. She was 1 year into Moody and was doing her summer internship with Hilda Kozer. And Dan, I was working with him in Maryland, getting ready for this teen camp that we were going to do. And I was working with him. It was going to be a roving evangelistic camp. And he said, and then there was going to be a children's camp. And he said, "Now go over to see Miss Kozer. She's got some Moody students there. Tell me who should be the head women's counselor when they join us." And so I went to visit my mom, and I dropped in at Miss Kozer's, and sure enough, I met Eva there. That's where I met my wife. And I saw she was wearing a Moody Bible Institute t-shirt. I said, "I start school there in August." And that's how we met. Anyway, so after Moody, Eva and I went to Los Angeles to Azusa Pacific University. Then she did her graduate degree at Wheaton Grad School. She squoze 2 years into one. So, because I was going to do a much longer degree at Dallas.
Yeah.
And I went to Dallas Theological Seminary. Then served in ministry. Did actually the whole time I was in college. I served with Chosen People Ministries. I served with another wonderful Jewish ministry when I was in Dallas, Ariel Ministries.
Yeah.
And then after seminary, I was with an independent congregation for 1 year. It was almost like a residency or an internship, but I was the congregational leader. in Columbus, Ohio, but felt that God wanted me in a bigger Jewish community. So I went to New York, served with Chosen People Ministries, and
that was mostly evangelistic or teaching, helping Gentiles as well understand Judaism, or?
my job was basically, my primary job was to plant a congregation on Long Island, which I did. The congregation is still there. The other thing I did is obviously I did a lot of speaking in congregations and churches to teach them about their Jewish, Long Island's huge Jewish community, teach them about their Jewish neighbors and how to have a loving witness to them. I also served in administration with Chosen People Ministries, led the training program that we had, summer training and evangelism program, and led a lot of programs through Chosen People Ministries that we had, and did that in New York for 10 years. I would have never left. Truly, I loved what I was doing. I loved my congregation. Other schools had approached me about teaching. I was like, no, I'm not interested. But when Moody said that they were looking for a new Jewish studies professor, Louis Goldberg was retiring. They asked if I would fill out the application. I said yes. And it was a tough time in our life, but just some things that were going on with my wife's health at the time. But we felt that God had called us there, and we moved to Chicago. And I left Chosen People Ministries, but have still a good relationship with that organization, as well as all the other Jewish ministries in the area. What a privilege I had to train so many young people coming through the 32 years now at Moody and seeing them go off into ministry around the globe, reach Jewish people. That was something I felt it was really important for me to expand. That's why I wanted to go to Moody, because it was a Jewish studies program and I could expand my ministry, reach more people, also teach the Bible to students who were not going into Jewish ministry, but wherever they were going, they were going to meet Jewish people. And I could give them a heart and a sensitivity for Jewish people. And so that's why I did that at Moody Bible Institute. And also always lived in a Jewish community myself. Was involved in doing Jewish ministry the whole time I was a professor at Moody.
And we're thankful for your ministry with us at Dallas Theological Seminary. We have a Master's of Arts in Jewish Studies as well, and thankful for you to be teaching our students, and especially Messiah, the Messianic prophecies in the Old Testament, right? So
yeah, I'm so grateful I get to teach Messiah in the Old Testament at Dallas Seminary. Hoping some of the other Jewish studies courses as well. Coming in as an adjunct to Dallas is always a great time, and I love DTS. Actually, I'll say this about Dallas Seminary. I brought my son with me when he was a little boy. He was not so little. He was 12 or 13. We went to Dallas. I was invited to speak during missions conference, and I was going to be one of the speakers. And it was an emphasis on reaching Jewish people that year, and I was one of the speakers. And I hadn't been to the seminary for 7 or 8 years because I was busy working on my doctorate and doing different things like that. And I did my doctorate, by the way, also at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago. When I brought my son there, I was just so taken aback. I stood there on the center plaza there by Mosher Library and the academic buildings and the Stearns Hall. And I was there by I don't think there's fountains anymore, but there used to be these fountains there, right? And I just started I teared up. I welled up because I was so grateful to God for the wonderful privilege I had of studying there and all that I learned and the wonderful professors I had that had made such a profound mark on my life. And I'm still grateful to God for Dallas Seminary. And who knew that I was ever going to go there? But, I'm grateful to God I did.
Well, and there's not a lot of schools like Dallas Seminary that have the view we have about ethnic Jewish Israel in the future. And Moody and Dallas Seminary, of course, had a long partnership and history, and thankful for that. And do want to encourage people to pick up your handbook, it's Moody Handbook on Messianic Prophecy. It's handbook may sound like it's small, but it's not, but it's very virtually exhaustive.
I wanted to call it the dictionary, but then people thought it would just have a definition.
But great resource.
The Moody Handbook of Messianic Prophecy is a good reference book about Messianic passages. And I only wrote about 10 articles, only 10, but we had professors from all over the world and who hold to the same high view of Scripture, many different schools, but a lot of them from Dallas write chapters in the book. And it's I think, a very helpful book for anyone that wants to see Messiah in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, great resource. Encourage everybody to get a copy of their own. as you're teaching through the Old Testament passages and pointing people to the Messianic fulfillment. So as we wrap up this episode, this podcast, what are some thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with from your years of ministry experience, teaching, preaching, teaching Messianic prophecies?
Well, I feel like what I'd like to really encourage people to do is to pray for Jewish people. I go to a congregation that has a real hope and a future for Israel. It's part of the doctrinal statement. We've moved to Grand Rapids to be near our son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren. We go to a congregation that is theologically sound, but we've been there for more than a year, have never heard anyone at the church pray for Jewish people. During Ramadan, we pray for Muslims to come to know the Lord. There's a concern for reaching people all over the globe, but theologically, they have the right view of Israel. But practically, I don't see any real concern for Jewish people. And if there's something I would leave you with, is that I think I came to the Lord because Dan Rigney was praying for me by name. He had heard about me being so angry with my mom, and he began to pray for me to come to know the Lord. And in Scripture, it says there's only one verse that talks about praying for lost people. It's Romans 10:1. It says, where Paul says, "My heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved." That's the only verse where it talks about. That means that gives us permission to pray for anyone who's lost to come to know the Lord. It gives us a good example. But I find it interesting that no one's really praying, not many people, I should say, of course there are some, praying for Israel to come to know the Lord. And I would just really encourage you, anyone listening to this personally, to do it, and also encourage at this season, for example, it's Passover season right now, just finished Passover when we're recording this, then pray for Jewish people to come to know the Lord. We're seeing many more Jewish people come to the Lord in this generation than we have in previous ones. And so maybe it's your prayers that God's going to use. He'll respond to that and open the hearts of some Jewish friend of yours. And so that's my great encouragement, to be concerned about caring for Jewish people, praying for Jewish people, even as you have the opportunity to talk about Messiah with Jewish people.
Wonderful. Very true. Thank you for that. We want to be theologically true, accurate, careful, but we need to have a heart and pray for our Jewish friends around the world. And thankful for ministries like Chosen People Ministries, One for Israel, Jews for Jesus, Friends of Israel. And we want to continue to partner with ministries that are doing that work of sharing the gospel and thinking of how we can better understand Judaism and build bridges to people in our communities who are of Jewish ethnicity or practicing Jewish people as well. Right. So, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to thank you, Dr. Rydelnik, for sharing such a powerful and deeply personal story, one that reminds us how God works through history and hardship to draw people to himself. And to all of you listening and watching, thank you for joining us for the Bible and Theology Matters podcast. We hope this episode has been encouraging to you and has strengthened your own faith. A special thank you to Dallas Theological Seminary for sponsoring this podcast. Be sure to join us again next time as I continue my conversation with Dr. Rydelnik. In our next episode, we'll be discussing his book, How Should Christians Think About Israel?, subtitled A Quick Guide to God's Covenants, Biblical Prophecy, and the Jewish People, where we'll explore what the Bible teaches about Israel, God's covenants, and the Jewish people, an important and often misunderstood topic, which is especially important for Christians in our day and age. You won't want to miss that conversation. But until next time, never forget, the Bible and theology really does matter, because what you really believe determines how you really behave.
Bible and Theology Matters podcast is a listener-supported podcast
devoted to helping Christians grow in their knowledge of the Word of God and in their relationship to the God of the Word.
To learn how you can partner with the Bible and Theology Matters podcast,
visit us at BibleandTheologyMatters.com. That's Bible, A-N-D, TheologyMatters.com.